This is the summary of When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Asha Bandel and Patris Khan Colors. Introduction. Black Lives Matter has been erroneously criticized for flipping the scales of race by replacing white privilege with black. But this is an unfair assessment, as the purpose of the movement has never been to overcompensate for centuries of black oppression by claiming supremacy over whites. Rather, Black Lives Matter is designed and upheld to show that everyone is important. Yet, as reflected in the title of her memoir, When They Call You a Terrorist, blackness has been attacked with the vitriol more often reserved for radical violence. Indeed, the same rhetoric that justifies Islamophobia and shuts down thoughtful debate about Palestine also discredits the validity of anti-racist movements. The very phrase Black Lives Matter is a powerful statement in itself for disrupting standard narratives of Americanness, which, like it or not, hold whiteness in distinct regard. Let us explore that disruption together and understand why those three simple words are anything but all the bones we could find. It's impossible to think about the interconnectedness of humanity without reminding ourselves that every individual is the sum of experiences that came before them. As beings moving into and out of this world, we are made of stardust and memories. Anyone who fights for equality carries histories of inequality inside them. For those fighting specifically to honor the viability of black lives, the need to breathe is as much a political statement as it is a means of survival. Black Lives Matter was created by Patris Khan Colors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi as a way of reclaiming a status that has yet to be granted to the oppressed. It's an ideology that goes beyond questions of skin color. Instead, it goes to the very core of what it means to be human. It is an assertion that everyone should have the basic right to live. Yet these three women are labeled terrorists by a cowardly media simply because they assert a fundamental truth. Khan Colors grew up in Van Nuys, California with three siblings. Her father left home when she was 6, but remained an active part of his children's lives. Not a mile away from their home was the rich white neighborhood of Sherman Oaks, where life seemed to exist in a world all its own and where differences were beginning to lodge themselves in Khan Colors' young mind as a social given. As the denizens of Sherman Oaks dined in their luxurious homes, Khan Colors was often left hungry, listening to her mother argue with a father who struggled to provide. Khan Colors and her siblings loved each other fiercely, which made it even brothers, merely because of the color of their skin. Looking back on that incident, she wishes she'd said or done something. Then again, her brothers never said anything either. For them, this was simply the way things were. Only years later, when reports of police officers being acquitted of murdering black youth started knocking on the doors of her memory, did Khan Colors rekindle those fires of protest. At the age of 12, Khan Colors' life took an unforeseen turn when her mother revealed that the man she'd always known as her father wasn't her biological one. That man was named Gabriel, and she agreed to meet him with great trepidation. They went out for the day. He lavished her with affection, but she felt unsure how to respond. He told her about his crack addiction and the struggles he faced to stay sober. She was never quite the same after that. Sometimes, she argued with her mother, perhaps out of anger at being deceived. Still, she could always find solace in the love she had in her siblings and at home. When Gabriel graduated from the Salvation Army rehab program, he became an active part of Khan Colors' life. Back on track, he worked his way toward financial independence, bought a car, and carted his daughter and her friends wherever they wanted to go. He also started bringing her to the church, where his 12-step meetings were held, and here, he introduced her to a tightly knit community of others who were intent on putting their lives back together. Khan Colors looks back fondly on those spaces where men weren't afraid to show their vulnerability, emotions, and dreams. But just as soon as she entered a new life with Gabriel, that addiction was a temptation practically force-fed to black communities, she responded with tears and confusion. This would become a leitmotif in Khan Colors' young life, as other boys in the neighborhood were arrested on a regular basis, often for undisclosed reasons. In his letters to her from prison, Gabriel apologized and promised to bring life back to the way it was. But she was learning that, sometimes, promises, no matter how heartfelt, were at odds with a society hell-bent on crushing them. This idea was further ingrained when her brother Monty was arrested after being coerced to commit burglary. Later, he was released from a psychiatric ward, pumped up on medication and left a shell of his former self. Patris's high school years were compounded by a string of realizations about herself. First, she rejected the Jehovah's Witnesses religion she'd been raised in, as none of the church's so-called elders could provide her with solid answers to valid questions. Second, she understood more than ever that she was queer and sought comfort in other gender-fluid youth at a time when LGBT movements were nascent at best. After graduating from high school, she dove into community organizing, facilitating dialogues around issues of racism, homophobia, and oppression. And with that, the fuel that had been gathering in her soul was at last ignited to become the flame she was destined to carry. Then, when Gabriel died, it made Con Colors question things all over again. Although his death was easily attributed to his years of drug abuse, a chain he could never quite break. More damaging in her mind were the untold years of abuse he suffered as a black man whose life was rarely valued on a human level. Despite his plight, he'd tried his best to love her as deeply as he could. And she continues to carry that love inside her, sheltered as a flicker of hope against the tide of discrimination she continues to fight. Black Lives Matter. By 2006, when Con Colors was in college and knee-deep in activism, her brother Monty was arrested again. Since his earlier release from prison, he'd been in a fragile mental state. Diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, he was emotionally unstable and unpredictable. When he got involved in a minor car accident with a white woman, the woman called the police, who without hesitation, shot him with rubber bullets and tased him without provocation. They charged him with terrorism, literally, locked him up, refused him his medication, and strapped him to a gurney like Hannibal Lecter. All this despite the fact that he never laid a hand on anyone. Throughout this ordeal, Patrice saw her mother's crushing guilt over being poor and not following standard protocol when it came to having a family. Realizing she needed to get a lawyer for her brother, a service that would cost $10,000, Patrice drew upon her connections, and in a matter of days, she had the money ready. Even with the lawyer's help, Monty struggled to hold down a job and started shooting heroin. When confronted by his family, he agreed to go to a hospital to get better. Seeing the family come together to get him there was inspiring beyond words. As the horrors of what Monty experienced in prison became clear, so did the abuses. The outright torture suffered by others like him. These people mattered so little that their bodies and minds could be systematically broken by officers, wardens, and sheriffs who knew exactly what was going on and not only happened, but also participated heartily in the abuses. In response, Con Colors started an organization called Dignity and Power Now with the goal of ending state-sanctioned violence in prisons. Like many following the killing of Trayvon Martin, Con Colors was shocked and outraged when his killer, a white man, was going to get off. Protests and rallies were organized, voices raised, and sentiments stirred. With social media on their side and resistance mounting, the killer was finally arrested and scrutinized as the violent criminal that he was. The public learned of his checkered past. His 45 calls to police about suspicious black males, his violent resistance to arrest, for which he received only a slap on the wrist, and the fiancé who got a restraining order against him. Appallingly, all this was known as a matter of record before the public demanded his arrest. When he was ultimately acquitted of all charges, Patrice's friend and activist Alicia Garza wrote a Facebook post in which she said, among other things, "I continue to be surprised at how little Black Lives Matter." In response to that post, Con Colors hashtag Black Lives Matter, and the movement was born. That single moment was a game changer. It meant that the conversation could no longer continue as it had been, in full ignorance of reality. Black Lives Matter led to marches in New York City and Los Angeles, protests in Oakland, and other public outcries in the name of bringing justice to victims of white-on-black violence. It was clear that law enforcement was in dire need of some enforcement itself. Narratives needed to be disrupted, and the status quo needed to be. Black Lives Matter has never been about demanding more than what anyone deserved. Rather, it is about redirecting hatred into love for all. Ending violence inflicted upon black bodies is about ending violence, period. Celebrating our differences is a way of showing that we're all the same. Black Lives Matter is about creating safe spaces for people of all colors and orientations. It is about justice and liberation for all. Conclusion. Now that Patrice Con Colors is married to the love of her life and is the mother of a child growing up in the wake of this storm, she's more determined than ever to pass on her understanding of the world to the next generation in a way that will preclude further violence. In the age of Trump, which felt like a huge step backward in many respects, Con Colors feels especially inclined to write history as she sees it, to handle the infractions leveled upon her and the movement she founded with dignity, and to ensure that none of this is ever forgotten.